There is a name that every child knows, a king who turned gold into a curse, a knot that no man could untie until one man refused to play by the rules, a goddess whose screaming priests shook the foundations of the ancient world. You have heard these stories. You have told them. You have repeated them to your children the way your parents repeated them to you. But here is what no one tells you. They were real. The king was real. The knot was real. The city was real. The civilization was real. And it was one of the most extraordinary that the ancient world ever produced. Its name was Phrygia, and almost no one remembers it. This is its story. Imagine a landscape that does not apologize for itself. Vast plateaus of volcanic rock cut by deep river valleys where the water runs cold and clear even in summer. Mountains that catch the first snow of October and hold it until April. Forests of cedar and pine stretching to the horizon in every direction. And above it all a sky so wide and so clear that on a moonless night the stars seem close enough to touch. This is Anatolia, the heartland of the ancient world, modern Turkey. But long before the Turks, before the Byzantines, before the Romans, before even the Greeks had written their first poems, this land belonged to others, to the Hittites, who built an empire that challenged Egypt for the mastery of the ancient world. And then around the 12th century BCE, the Hittite Empire collapsed. No one knows exactly why. Scholars debate it still. Drought, internal rebellion, the invasion of mysterious peoples from the sea and the north. Perhaps all three arriving at once, like a storm from three directions simultaneously. But collapse it did. And in the vacuum it left behind, in the highland plateaus of central Anatolia, where the Hittite governors had once ruled and the Hittite roads had once run, a new people arrived. They came from the west, from Thrace most likely, the region that today straddles Bulgaria, Greece, and European Turkey. They spoke an Indo-European language related to Greek. They herded animals, worked metal, and carried with them a culture that was rough at its edges and extraordinary at its core. They were the Phrygians, and they were about to build something the world would not forget. The landscape shaped them from the beginning. The Anatolian plateau is not gentle. The winters are brutal, temperatures dropping far below zero, snow lying heavy on the ground for months at a time. The summers are relentless, the sun baking the earth into dust, the wind carrying that dust across the plateau in clouds that could blot out the horizon. The Phrygians did not merely survive this landscape, they learned from it. They built cities of stone that could endure the cold. They carved their most sacred monuments directly into the living rock of the cliffs, not constructing temples that could burn or fall, but cutting them into the earth itself, as permanent as the mountains they stood beside. They developed agriculture suited to the harsh climate. They bred horses. The plateau was perfect for it, and became renowned horsemen. They traded obsidian, metals, and textiles along routes that connected Mesopotamia to the Aegean. And they watched the mountains, and they listened to the wind, because in those mountains and that wind, they believed, lived something older and more powerful than any god with a human face. Every great civilization begins with a story about how it began. The Romans had Romulus and Remus, suckled by a wolf. The Greeks had the gods themselves descending from Olympus to found their cities. The Phrygians had Gordius and a cart. The story, as it has come down to us through Greek and Roman sources, goes like this. Gordius was a farmer, a poor man working a small plot of land on the Anatolian plateau, his hands calloused from the plough, his back bent from years of labor. He had no army, no wealth, no particular reason to believe that the gods had anything special in mind for him. But one day, as Gordius was working his fields, an eagle landed on his cart and refused to move. It sat there all day, watching him with its unblinking eye. Gordius, unsettled, went to consult the oracle, the sacred interpreters of divine will who lived in a nearby city. The oracle told him, Go to the city of Gordian. A new king will be chosen today. Watch for the signs. Gordius climbed onto his cart, Eagle still perched on the yoke, and drove into the city. He arrived at precisely the moment when the people were gathered in the marketplace, waiting. They had received their own oracle. The next king of Phrygia will come riding on a cart. Gordius arrived on a cart. The eagle was still there, and so a farmer became a king. Whether this story is literally true, whether there was a single founding moment, a single farmer king, a single eagle, is almost certainly less important than what the story means. It means that Phrygian kingship was not inherited, it was chosen. Chosen by the gods, recognized by the people, confirmed not by bloodline but by divine sign. It was a different model of power than the hereditary monarchies around them. And it produced a different kind of king. Gordius established his capital at the city that would bear his name forever, Gordion. Located on the banks of the Sangarius River, today called the Sakarya, winding through central Turkey, Gordian sat at a natural crossroads. The routes connecting east and west, north and south, all passed through or near it. To control Gordian was to control trade. To control trade was to control wealth. To control wealth was to control power. Gordius understood this. Under his reign, Gordian grew from a modest settlement into a true city. Walls were raised, palaces were built, workshops hummed with the sound of metalworkers, weavers and potters, markets filled with goods from across Anatolia and beyond. And in the forecourt of the great temple of Zeus, the supreme sky god, Gordius tied his famous cart to the temple pole with a knot, not just any knot, a knot of extraordinary complexity. The bark of the cornel tree twisted and looped and folded back on itself in a configuration so intricate that no loose end was visible. No beginning, no end. Just an endless tangle of wood and fiber, as if the knot itself were a living thing that had grown around the cart rather than been tied to it. And the prophecy that accompanied it has echoed across millennia. Whoever unties this knot will rule all of Asia. The Gordian Knot was born. For generations, the knot sat in the temple of Zeus in Gordion. Kings came and went. Empires rose and fell across the horizon. The Assyrians expanded their empire westward. The Greeks colonized the Aegean coast. The Eurasians built their kingdom in the mountains to the east. And the knot remained. People came to see it, of course. Pilgrims, soldiers, merchants who had heard the legend and wanted to see it with their own eyes. Some of them tried to untie it, pressing their fingers into the loops, searching for the hidden end that would unravel the whole. None succeeded. It is worth pausing here to think about what the Gordian Knot actually was, not as legend, but as symbol. The Phrygians lived at the intersection of worlds. To their west were the Greeks, expanding and restless. To the east were the Assyrians and later the Medes and Persians, empires of extraordinary scale and military power. To the north were the nomadic peoples of the steppe, periodically erupting southward in waves of destruction. To the south were the trading cities of the Levantine coast connected to Egypt and Mesopotamia. Phrygia sat at the center of all of this. The Gordian Knot was not just a religious object, it was a statement. It said, "We are the center. We are the axis around which the world turns. Whoever controls this place controls everything." The knot was Phrygia's claim to cosmic significance. And then, in the spring of 333 BCE, a young Macedonian king arrived in Gordian. He was 22 years old. He had already crossed the Hellespont, won his first major battle against the Persians at the Granicus River, and liberated the Greek cities of the Aegean coast. He was moving east toward the heart of the Persian Empire, toward a destiny that seemed written in the stars. His name was Alexander. The soldiers called him the Great, though he had not yet done the things that would earn that title permanently. Alexander entered Gordian and went to the temple of Zeus. He stood before the Gordian Knot and studied it. The court watched, his generals watched, the people of the city watched. He spent some time examining it, fingers moving across the loops, searching for the hidden end, just as so many before him had done. And then he did something no one before him had done. He stopped looking for the end. He drew his sword, or in some versions of the story, removed the pin that held the cart's yoke, allowing the knot to slip free. The details differ depending on the source. What all sources agree on is the result. The knot was undone. Alexander slept that night in the palace of the Phrygian kings. That night, there was a great storm, thunder and lightning crashing over Gordian. Alexander's soothsayers interpreted this as divine confirmation. The gods had approved. He went on to conquer Persia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Bactria, and the edge of India. He did, in the end, rule all of Asia, or close enough to it. The Gordian Knot had told the truth. But what does it mean? The lesson that history has drawn from the Gordian Knot is usually stated like this. When faced with an intractable problem, sometimes the right answer is to abandon conventional thinking entirely and take decisive action. Cut the knot, don't untie it. Change the terms of the problem. It is good advice. It has been repeated in business schools and military academies and leadership seminars for centuries. But there is another reading, a darker one. Alexander did not solve the knot, he destroyed it. He did not find the hidden order within the complexity. He eliminated the complexity by force. And the Phrygian kingdom that the knot represented? That too was eliminated. Absorbed into Alexander's empire, its distinct identity dissolved into the vast Greek-speaking world that Alexander's conquests created. The knot was cut, and so was Phrygia. To understand the Phrygian kingdom, you must understand its capital. Gordian was not simply a city, it was a statement of intent. Built at a crossing of the Sangarius River on the Anatolian plateau, it commanded the main route connecting the Aegean coast to the interior of Anatolia and beyond. Every merchant, every diplomat, every army that wanted to move between east and west passed through or near Gordian, the city that archaeologists have excavated, beginning with American teams in the 1950s under Rodney Young and continuing through the present, reveals a place of remarkable sophistication. The earliest occupation of the site dates to the early Bronze Age, but the city reached its greatest extent and power during the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, the height of Phrygian power. At its peak, Gordian was enclosed by massive mud brick walls reinforced with stone foundations, rising to heights that made it one of the most formidable fortifications in Anatolia. The Citadel Gate was a masterpiece of military architecture and symbolic design simultaneously. Visitors approaching from the outside passed through a long, narrow entrance corridor, a killing ground if enemies breached the outer gates, before arriving in a courtyard dominated by the scale and grandeur of the inner gate building. The message was both practical and psychological. This is a place that cannot be taken. This is a people that cannot be broken. Inside the citadel, the megaron buildings dominated the central area. These were large, rectangular hall structures, the form almost certainly borrowed from or parallel to the Greek megaron tradition, used for feasting, ceremony, and the administration of the kingdom. The floors were covered in elaborate mosaic patterns made from pebbles, geometric designs in black, red, and white that represent some of the earliest pebble mosaic floors ever discovered anywhere in the world. Centuries before the Greeks developed pebble mosaic into a high art form, the Phrygians were already doing it in Gordian. The storerooms of the citadel held thousands of ceramic vessels, storage jars, drinking cups, cooking pots, representing the economic life of a city that fed, housed, and administered a substantial population. Bronze cauldrons, iron tools, worked bone and ivory, the material culture of a people who were integrated into the broader trade networks of the ancient Near East, receiving influences from Urartu, Assyria, Greece, and the Levant, while developing something distinctly their own. And beneath the city, beneath the later construction levels, archaeologists have found evidence of the catastrophe that ended Gordian's golden age. A massive destruction layer, fire, collapse, the physical signature of a city violently overwhelmed. The Cimmerians had come. Before we speak of gold and curses, we must understand who Midas actually was. Because Midas, the historical Midas, as opposed to the legendary one, was one of the most powerful rulers in the ancient Near East during the late 8th century BCE. And his story is far more interesting and far more human than the myth suggests. His name appears in the records of the Assyrian Empire as Mita of Mushki, Mushki being the Assyrian name for the Phrygians. He is mentioned in the annals of the Assyrian king Sargon II, one of the great empire builders of the ancient world. This is significant. The Assyrian Empire at this period was the dominant military power in the ancient Near East. The fact that Midas appears in Assyrian records, not as a conquered people, but as a foreign king with whom Sargon II negotiated, tells us something important. Midas was a figure of sufficient stature that even the Assyrians took him seriously. He was not just a fairy tale king, he was a statesman. Midas ruled Phrygia at its moment of maximum power. The kingdom extended from the Aegean coast deep into the Anatolian interior. Trade routes that connected Greece to the east passed through Phrygian territory, and the customs and tolls collected on those routes made Gordian extraordinarily wealthy. The historical Midas also had connections to the Greek world. He is said to have been the first non-Greek ruler to send a dedication to the sanctuary at Delphi, the sacred oracle site that was the spiritual center of the Greek world. The throne he sent is mentioned by the Greek historian Herodotus as still being there in the treasury centuries later. A Phrygian king sending gifts to Delphi. The Greek world and the Phrygian world were not strangers. They were neighbors, trading partners, rivals, and sometimes allies. And then there is the legend. The myth of Midas and the Golden Touch appears in multiple ancient sources, but the fullest version comes from the Roman poet Ovid, writing in the 1st century BCE, nearly 1,000 years after the historical Midas lived. The story goes like this. Silenus, the elderly satyr companion of the god Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, had wandered away from the god's entourage and was found drunk in the rose gardens of Midas, sleeping among the flowers. Rather than driving him away or punishing him, Midas welcomed Silenus, entertained him lavishly for 10 days, and then personally escorted him back to Dionysus. The god was grateful. He offered Midas a wish, anything he desired, and Midas, without pausing to think, said, "I wish that everything I touch turns to gold." Dionysus granted it, and for a moment, perhaps just a moment, Midas must have felt the intoxicating rush of a wish fulfilled. He touched an oak branch, and it became gold. He touched a stone, and it became gold. He touched the ground, and everywhere his foot fell, a trail of gold gleamed in the sunlight. But then he sat down to eat. The bread became gold in his hands. The wine became gold at his lips. His daughter ran to him, and he touched her, and she became a cold golden statue. Midas had wished for infinite wealth. He had received infinite starvation. He prayed to Dionysus for release, and the god, merciful, told him, "Go to the river Pactolus, wash your hands in its waters, the curse will leave you, and enter the river." Midas went. He washed his hands, and the gold left him. The river Pactolus, a real river flowing through Lydia in western Anatolia, was afterwards said to carry gold dust in its waters. This was the geological explanation the ancient world gave for the river's natural gold deposits. The curse of Midas had become the wealth of the river. What does the myth mean? On its surface, it is a story about greed. Be careful what you wish for. Wealth without wisdom is destruction. But there is something deeper here. Midas was a real king. He ruled a kingdom made wealthy by trade and metalworking. Phrygia was genuinely associated with gold. The rivers of Anatolia did carry placer gold, and Phrygian metalworkers were genuinely skilled. The myth of the golden touch may be the ancient world's way of remembering something true, that Phrygia was a kingdom of extraordinary wealth, that its king lived surrounded by gold, that gold was both the source of its power and ultimately the thing that attracted the enemies who destroyed it. Wealth is power. Power draws enemies. Enemies bring ruin. The golden touch was real. The curse was real too. Away from Gordian, in the rocky highlands of central Anatolia, the Phrygians left another kind of monument entirely. Not cities, not palaces, not temples built from cut stone and timber. They cut their monuments directly into the cliffs. The Phrygian Valley, a region of dramatic volcanic rock formations in what is today the Afyonkarahisar and Eskişehir provinces of Turkey, is scattered with these rock-cut facades. Carved from the living stone of the cliff faces, they represent some of the most extraordinary religious monuments in the ancient world. The greatest of them is called, by modern observers, not by the Phrygians themselves, the Midas monument. Stand before it, and the scale stops you. The facade rises over 17 meters, nearly 6 stories, carved directly from a vertical cliff face. Its surface is covered in intricate geometric patterns, an interlocking network of meanders, squares, and circular designs that cover every centimeter of the carved area in a dense, almost hypnotic tapestry of form. At the center of the facade, a rectangular niche. Inside the niche, once, stood a statue, the image of the great mother goddess Cybele, the most powerful deity in the Phrygian world, and carved into the rock above the niche in the Phrygian alphabet, one of the earliest alphabetic inscriptions ever found in Anatolia, a dedication, a name, an inscription that has been read by modern scholars as containing the name Midas. Whether this monument was commissioned by the historical King Midas, or whether it was dedicated to his memory after his death, or whether the connection to Midas is a later association, scholars continue to debate. What is beyond debate is the monument's power. It was not built to be seen from close up. The geometric patterns, the intricate carvings, these are most effective from a distance, when the human eye loses the ability to follow individual lines and the overall effect becomes something else, a texture of extraordinary complexity, a surface that shimmers and pulses in changing light. The Phrygians did not build for intimacy, they built for awe. Around the Midas monument, scattered across the Phrygian valley, are dozens of smaller rock-cut facades, niches and altars. Some are barely a meter across. Some are half-finished, abandoned mid-carving. The tools still evident in the unsmoothed rock. They tell a story of a religious landscape, a sacred geography in which the cliffs themselves were understood as interfaces between the human world and the divine. You did not enter a Phrygian temple. You stood before the mountain and asked it to open. Drive through the landscape around Gordian today, and the horizon is punctuated by low, rounded hills that seem too regular to be natural. They are not natural, they are tumuli, burial mounds. Dozens of them ranging from modest earthen heaps a few meters high to the massive Midas mound, known in Turkish as Büyük Hoyuk, the Great Mound, which rises over 50 meters from the surrounding plain and has a diameter of nearly 300 meters. It is one of the largest burial mounds in the ancient world. The Midas mound was excavated in 1957 by Rodney Young and his team from the University of Pennsylvania. The process of excavation took weeks, tunneling horizontally through the packed earth and clay of the mound's interior until the excavators reached, at the very center, a burial chamber. What they found inside had been sealed for nearly 3,000 years. A wooden chamber, constructed from juniper logs notched and fitted together without nails in a technique similar to a log cabin, sat at the heart of the mound. The wood had been preserved by the very completeness of its burial. Sealed from air, from water, from insects, the juniper had simply waited. Inside the chamber, on a wooden bed framed with iron fibulae, lay the remains of a man, an elderly man, 60 to 65 years old at the time of his death. Small in stature, perhaps 1.59 meters tall, arthritic. From the bone evidence, a man who had lived long and worked hard. Was this Midas, or one of his predecessors? The burial dates to approximately 740 BCE, consistent with what we know of the historical Midas's timeline. The age of the body, an old man, matches the tradition of a long-reigning king, but the evidence is circumstantial. The chamber contains no inscription, no name. What it does contain is remarkable. The grave goods surrounding the body represent the largest collection of Phrygian material culture ever found in a single context. Bronze cauldrons, massive vessels up to a meter in diameter, decorated with the heads of sirens and lions, bronze fibulae in the hundreds, bronze omphalos bowls, wooden furniture inlaid with geometric designs in contrasting woods, a drinking set, jugs, bowls and cups, that represented the final feast. Because the burial included a feast, not symbolic offerings of food, an actual feast. The residue of the food and drink consumed at the king's funeral banquet, beer, wine, a spiced meat stew, still detectable in the vessels after 3 millennia. The guests at the funeral feast had eaten and drunk in honor of their king, and the remnants of that meal had gone into the ground with him. A feast for the dead. A farewell as elaborate as the life it honored. We do not know this king's name for certain. We know his age. We know the food he was honored with at death. We know that hundreds of people gathered at his burial mound and drank to his memory before the earth was closed over him forever. We know that someone, many someones, worked for months or years to build the mound that would protect him. We know that they believed this man deserved to be remembered. Perhaps that is enough. If the Phrygian kingdom produced one contribution to world history more lasting than any other, it may not be a king or a knot or even a city. It may be a goddess. Cybele, the Great Mother, the Mountain Mother, the Lady of Beast, was the supreme deity of the Phrygian world. And she did not stay in Phrygia. She traveled west, first to Greece, then to Rome, then across the entire Roman Empire. She became one of the most widely worshipped deities in the ancient world, her cult spreading from Anatolia to Britain, from Mesopotamia to the Atlantic coast of Spain. But she began here, in the mountains of Phrygia. Her Phrygian name was Mater Cubilea, the Mountain Mother. She was not a gentle goddess. She was not a goddess of hearths and homes and quiet domesticity. She was the goddess of the wild places, the mountains, the forests, the untamed landscape beyond the edges of the city. She was the source of life and the force of death. She controlled the fertility of the earth, and she could withdraw it, leaving barrenness and famine in her wake. She was depicted seated on a throne, flanked by lions, not tame lions, not pets, but wild lions, barely contained by her presence. She wore a polos, a cylindrical crown symbolizing the walls of a city, because she was also the protector of cities. She held a drum because her worship was inseparable from music. Music was the technology of Cybele's worship, not gentle music, ecstatic music. Her priests, the Galli, were castrated men who had given their bodies to the goddess in acts of extreme religious devotion. They dressed in women's clothing, wore elaborate jewelry, and served Cybele in rituals of extraordinary intensity. They played the tympanum, a framed drum, the cymbals, and the aulos, a double-piped wind instrument that produced a shrill, penetrating sound designed to carry across distances and pierce through the barriers of ordinary consciousness. The rituals of Cybele were not calm observances, they were performances of controlled, and sometimes uncontrolled, ecstasy. Dancing that continued until the participants reached states of altered awareness, processions through cities where the galley, adorned with bells and ribbons, begged for offerings, mountain ceremonies at the goddess's sacred sites, where the boundaries between human and divine, between controlled and wild, were deliberately dissolved. The ancient Greeks and Romans were simultaneously fascinated and disturbed by all of this. The Greek philosopher Pindar wrote about Cybele's rites with a mixture of reverence and unease. The Roman poet Catullus wrote a long poem about the Gallus Attis, a young man who castrated himself in the ecstasy of the goddess's worship, and then, in a moment of returning sanity, mourned what he had lost. The poem ends in terror, not triumph, and yet, in 204 BCE, at a moment of crisis in the Second Punic War, when Hannibal's Carthaginian army was still in Italy, and the Roman Senate was desperate for any divine advantage, a delegation was sent to Phrygia. The Sibylline oracle had declared, "Bring the Great Mother to Rome." A sacred stone, the black meteor that served as Cybele's cult object, was transported from Phrygia to Rome in a ship that, according to legend, ran aground in the Tiber and could not be moved until a Vestal virgin proved her chastity by pulling it free with her girdle. Cybele entered Rome, and she never left. The Roman state built her a great temple on the Palatine Hill, the most sacred hill in Rome, the Hill of Romulus, the hill of Rome's legendary founding. Every spring, the festival of Cybele, the Megalesia, was celebrated with games, processions, and theatrical performances. The Phrygian goddess had become Roman, and through Rome she spread further still. Her worship reached the Rhine frontier, the legions of Britain, the trading cities of North Africa. The mountain goddess of Anatolia had conquered the world without an army. She had used music and mystery and the ancient human need to feel for a moment that the boundaries of the self can dissolve and something larger can rush in. The Phrygians were not just warriors and worshippers, they were makers. The material culture of the Phrygian kingdom, recovered from the excavations of Gordian and other sites, reveals a people of extraordinary artistic sophistication, working across a wide range of media with a confidence and inventiveness that still astonishes. Phrygian bronze work was among the finest produced anywhere in the ancient world. The great bronze cauldrons found in the Midas mound, some still bearing the ring-handled attachments that allowed them to be carried or suspended over fires, were not merely functional objects. The largest of them stand nearly 1 meter tall, their surfaces decorated with protome attachments, the heads of sirens and griffins and lions cast separately and riveted to the rim. The siren heads are particularly extraordinary. Human faces, or mostly human, with wide eyes, stylized hair, and expressions that manage to be simultaneously serene and unsettling. They look out from the rim of the cauldron as if watching the world from the edge of the underworld itself. These cauldrons were prestige objects, symbols of wealth, power, and the ability to host the kind of enormous feasts that cemented political relationships in the ancient world. To own one was to announce yourself as a person of consequence. To give one as a gift was to create an obligation that could last generations. Phrygian cauldrons traveled. Examples have been found across the Mediterranean world, in Greece, in Etruria, in the Near East. They were traded, given as diplomatic gifts, dedicated in sanctuaries. They carried Phrygian influence wherever they went. Among the most surprising discoveries at Gordian is the evidence of extraordinary woodworking skill. The furniture from the Midas mound, tables and stands that would have furnished the burial chamber, was constructed with joinery techniques of remarkable sophistication. Mortise and tenon joints, inlay work in contrasting woods, geometric patterns achieved not by carving but by assembling small pieces of differently colored wood into complex designs. The Phrygians were working in marquetry, wood inlay, at a period when this technique was just beginning to develop elsewhere in the ancient world, and they were doing it at a level of precision that rivals the finest furniture of any period. Phrygia was famous throughout the ancient world for its textiles. The phrase Phrygian work, opus Phrygium in Latin, became a technical term in Roman times for the finest quality of embroidered textile, particularly gold embroidery. The Phrygians wove in wool and linen, and they embroidered in silk and gold thread. Their designs were geometric. The same vocabulary of meanders, squares, and interlocking forms that appears in their architecture and their metalwork, executed with a fineness and precision that made Phrygian cloth the luxury good of its age. Phrygian textiles dressed the priests of Cybele as they processed through Greek and Roman cities. They draped the altars of temples across the Mediterranean. They were the fabric of ceremony, the clothing of the sacred. The Phrygians were famous, notorious even, for their music. The ancient Greeks attributed the invention of several musical instruments to Phrygia, including the aulos, the double-piped wind instrument that became one of the most important instruments in Greek musical life. The Phrygian mode, one of the fundamental scales of ancient Greek music theory, was considered by the Greeks to be emotionally intense, suitable for states of excitement, passion, and ecstasy. Aristotle discussed it in his Politics. Plato worried about it. The music of Phrygia was not background, it was an experience. It was the sound of something ancient and uncontrolled. The sound of the mountains, the sound of the goddess, the sound of the part of human experience that does not submit to reason. It came from the north. The Cimmerians were a nomadic people of the Eurasian steppe, the vast grasslands that stretch from Ukraine to Kazakhstan, who were themselves displaced southward by the pressure of another nomadic people, the Scythian. They poured through the Caucasus Mountains and into Anatolia sometime in the early 7th century BCE, and they were devastating. This was not an army in the conventional sense, not a disciplined force with a chain of command and a defined political objective. It was a wave, tens of thousands of mounted warriors who struck fast, plundered everything of value, and moved on before a defense could be organized. The cities of Anatolia were not built for this kind of war. Gordian was hit sometime around 696 or 695 BCE. The archaeological evidence is unambiguous. The thick destruction layer that archaeologists found beneath later construction levels tells the story in the most direct language possible. Fire, lots of it. The mud brick walls of the palatial buildings baked hard by the heat of the conflagration that consumed them. Artifacts scattered and broken, not carefully stored but violently disturbed, evidence of sudden, catastrophic abandonment. And in the ancient sources, the tradition that Midas died in the Cimmerian invasion. The Greek geographer Strabo, writing centuries later, records the tradition that Midas, seeing the destruction of his kingdom and facing the humiliation of capture, drank the blood of a bull and died by his own hand. A king who had turned everything to gold, dying by drinking blood. History has a way of writing its own ironies. The Cimmerian invasion did not end Phrygian civilization entirely. Gordian was rebuilt. People returned. the Phrygian heartland continued to be inhabited, and something like a Phrygian political entity persisted for another century or more. But the Golden Age was over. The Phrygian kingdom that had corresponded with the Assyrian Empire sent gifts to Delphi, traded with Greeks and Eurasians and Lydians. The kingdom died with Midas. What came after was a twilight. The Lydians were Phrygia's western neighbors, a sophisticated people who built their kingdom in the fertile river valleys of western Anatolia, with their capital at Sardis not far from the Aegean coast. They were not enemies of the Phrygians in the way the Cimmerians were. They were, in some ways, cultural heirs, deeply influenced by Phrygian art, religion, and traditions, sharing the same broad cultural world. But after the Cimmerian catastrophe, as Phrygia struggled to recover, it was the Lydian kingdom that filled the power vacuum. Under the Lydian king Gyges, the contemporary of Midas, and his successors, Lydian control extended eastward across Anatolia. The Phrygian cities came under Lydian influence, then Lydian control, then Lydian administration. The Phrygian language survived for centuries. Phrygian religious practices, above all the worship of Cybele, were absorbed into the Lydian world and from there into the Greek world. But the Phrygian kingdom, as a political entity, as a distinct center of power, effectively ended with the Cimmerian invasion and the Lydian succession. Phrygia became a place, no longer a kingdom. And then the Persians came and it became a province. And then Alexander came and he cut the Gordian Knot and it became part of his empire. And in every transformation, something of Phrygia survived. The goddess continued to be worshipped. The musical traditions continued to be practiced. The geometric art forms continued to influence the craftsmen of Anatolia. A kingdom can die. A culture takes longer. For most of modern history, the Phrygians were known primarily through their legends, Midas and his golden touch, the Gordian Knot, Cybele and her ecstatic priests. The material reality of the civilization, the cities, the tombs, the artifacts, was largely unknown or inaccessible. That began to change in the 20th century. The excavations at Gordian, begun in the 1950s under Rodney Young of the University of Pennsylvania, opened a window into the Phrygian world that has never closed. 60 years of continuous excavation have produced a picture of the Phrygian capital of extraordinary detail and depth. The discovery of the Midas Mound tomb in 1957 was a watershed moment, the largest intact Phrygian burial ever found, preserving a snapshot of Phrygian material culture at its peak. But perhaps the most significant development came with the application of scientific analysis to the organic remains from the tomb. A team led by Patrick McGovern of the University of Pennsylvania analyzed the residue from the drinking vessels found in the Midas Mound. They identified the components of the beverages consumed at the funeral feast, a mixture of wine, beer, and mead flavored with honey, saffron, and other spices. A Phrygian drink, 3,000 years old, recreated in a laboratory. McGovern worked with the chef, Sam Calagione of Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, to produce a modern version, Midas Touch, a beer-wine-mead hybrid brewed from barley, white muscat grapes, honey, and saffron. The drink that Midas's mourners drank at his funeral can be tasted today. Time folds in strange ways. Meanwhile, in the Phrygian highlands, ongoing excavation and survey work has continued to reveal new monuments, new inscriptions, and new evidence of the religious landscape. The rock-cut facades of the Phrygian Valley, the Midas Monument, and its dozens of companion monuments are now a UNESCO-recognized cultural landscape, protected and studied with the tools of modern archaeology. And scholars continue to work at deciphering the Phrygian language itself, a task complicated by the limited number of texts and the partial nature of our understanding of the language's grammar and vocabulary. Every new inscription found is a sentence recovered from oblivion. The phrase "cutting the Gordian knot" appears in the language of business, politics, military strategy, and everyday problem-solving in virtually every language derived from the Western tradition. It means, stop trying to solve the problem within its existing framework. Change the framework. Take decisive action. Don't be bound by convention. It is, in a sense, the most enduring intellectual contribution of a civilization that most people cannot locate on a map. Think about that for a moment. A small kingdom in central Anatolia, destroyed nearly 3,000 years ago, contributed a metaphor to human thought that is still actively used every day in boardrooms and parliaments and military headquarters around the world. The Phrygians are gone. Their language is a scholarly specialty. Their cities are archaeological sites. Their political structures have been dissolved for millennia. But their knot remains. Every time a strategist says we need to cut the Gordian Knot, every time a leader chooses bold action over endless deliberation, the Phrygians are present. Their insight about the nature of intractable problems preserved in the memory of a legendary knot tied to a cart by a farmer king 3,000 years ago still shapes how human beings think about decision-making. That is a form of immortality. Not the golden immortality that Midas dreamed of, the kind that turns everything it touches into a cold, brilliant, lifeless object. A different kind, living, active, woven into the way we think. The wind still blows across the Anatolian plateau, the same wind that dried the sweat of Phrygian farmers on summer afternoons. The same wind that carried the sound of drums from the mountain shrines of Cybele across the valley floors. The same wind that stirred the banners of Gordion when the kings rode out to war. The plateau is quieter now. The cities are beneath the earth, waiting for the archaeologists' careful hands. The great tumuli stand like sleeping giants on the horizon, guarding whatever secrets they have not yet given up. But the legends travel with the wind. Midas is still out there, somewhere in the human imagination. That moment of terrible clarity when the wish is granted and the food turns to gold between his fingers. And he understands too late what he has done, what he has lost, what greed, unchecked by wisdom, always costs. The Gordian Knot is still out there, in every conference room where someone says there has to be a better way, in every moment of strategic courage when a leader decides to change the rules rather than play a losing game. Cybele is still out there, in every procession, every festival, every moment when human beings beat drums and lose themselves in rhythm and feel for an instant that the boundaries of the individual self are not as solid as they usually seem. The Phrygians are gone, but they are not finished. They gave us a king whose greed became a lesson, a knot that taught us how to think, a goddess who proved that ideas, carried in the hearts of believers, can travel further and last longer than any army, any empire, any war. The plateau holds its silence, the tumuli keep their watch, and the wind carries the sound of drums, very faint, almost gone, but still there across 3,000 years of distance. Listen. Good night.